Every complex system begins with something simple. Every industry. Strip away the noise. Decode reality first principles.
Imagine replacing a diesel train with a train that emits nothing but water. No smoke, no carbon dioxide, just water vapor. It sounds like the perfect future. So when India launched its first hydrogen train, headlines celebrated it as the next revolution in railways. But here's the real question. If hydrogen trains are so revolutionary, why aren't countries rapidly replacing all their trains with hydrogen? Why did Germany, the world's hydrogen train pioneer, discover unexpected challenges? Why are countries like Japan and China still experimenting instead of deploying them everywhere? And more importantly, does hydrogen actually make economic sense for a country like India? Let's decode this from first principles. Before discussing hydrogen, let's understand trains. A train needs one thing: energy. Historically, there were only three options: steam, diesel, electricity. Today, most modern countries are replacing diesel with electric trains because electric motors are incredibly efficient. The problem? Electric trains need overhead electric wires. Those wires cost millions of dollars to install. Instead of taking electricity from wires, the train carries its own electricity plant. Hydrogen enters a fuel cell. The fuel cell combines hydrogen with oxygen. Electricity is produced. The electric motor drives the train. Only water comes out. Sounds perfect. But reality is much more complicated. Germany became the global pioneer. In 2018, Alstom introduced the Coradia Island, the world's first commercial hydrogen passenger train. Why Germany? Because many regional railway lines weren't electrified. Instead of spending billions on overhead wires, hydrogen looked attractive. But after years of operation, problems emerged. Hydrogen remained expensive. Fuel production, storage, refueling infrastructure, all expensive. And maintaining an entirely new fuel ecosystem increased operational complexity. Germany continues supporting hydrogen where electrification is impractical, but the economics remain challenging and policy support is still needed. France ordered hydrogen trains mainly for regional roads. Again, the motivation wasn't performance. It was avoiding electrification costs. The challenge: regional governments discovered infrastructure costs were often larger than expected. A single hydrogen fueling station isn't enough. The entire supply chain must exist. Italy selected hydrogen trains for specific mountainous routes. The logic was simple. Very few trains use those routes. Electrifying them would never recover the investment. Hydrogen becomes a niche solution, not a nationwide replacement. China is approaching hydrogen differently. China isn't only building trains, it is building an entire hydrogen economy: hydrogen trucks, hydrogen buses, hydrogen industry, hydrogen pipelines, hydrogen production. For China, the train is just one consumer inside a much larger ecosystem supported by industrial policy. Japan has invested in hydrogen for over 2 decades. Not because hydrogen is currently cheaper, but because Japan imports most fossil fuels. Hydrogen provides long-term energy security. Japan sees hydrogen as a national strategic technology. Railways are only one small part. India has now joined this small group by launching its first domestically built hydrogen-powered train as a pilot project. The train operates on the Jind and Suni path section in Haryana and is intended to evaluate hydrogen fuel, cell technology, and associated refueling infrastructure. But here's the interesting part. India already has one of the world's largest electrified railway networks. Over 99% of the broad gauge network is electrified, which immediately raises an important question. Why use hydrogen at all? We'll answer that soon. Hydrogen sounds clean, but where does hydrogen come from? Hydrogen isn't an energy source, it's an energy carrier. Think of it like a battery. First, you need electricity. Then you split water, compress, transport, store, pump, converting back. Every step loses energy. That's why direct electrification remains far more energy efficient whenever overhead wires are practical. Hydrogen's strength is not efficiency. It's flexibility where electrification is uneconomic. Let's compare. Diesel existing infrastructure but pollution and fuel imports. Electric lowest operating cost, highest efficiency, mature technology but very high initial electrification cost. Hydrogen, zero local emissions, no overhead wires. Useful for isolated routes, but production is expensive, refueling stations are expensive, storage is difficult, energy losses are significant, and green hydrogen availability remains limited. Because railways are not the only customer. Hydrogen is expected to play a much larger role in sectors that are difficult to electrify directly. If a country already produces large amounts of hydrogen, using some of it for trains becomes easier. The train is just another customer. This is exactly how countries like Japan and China increasingly view hydrogen, as part of a broader industrial strategy rather than a railway strategy. Now let's apply first principles. India has several realities. First, income per capita remains much lower than developed countries. Every infrastructure decision must maximize value for every rupee invested. Second, Indian Railways has already completed one of the world's largest railway electrification programs, covering more than 99% of its broad gauge network. Third, India still faces pressing challenges: freight bottlenecks, congested roads, station modernization, high-speed corridors, safety upgrades, capacity expansion. These investments directly improve service for millions of passengers. From a narrow railway economics perspective, expanding electrification and improving existing electric operations will usually deliver higher returns than replacing already electrified routes with hydrogen. Hydrogen may still make sense for India in specific cases. Remote railway branches, heritage railways, mountain roads, low-traffic routes where electrification cannot be economically justified. And perhaps most importantly, research. Pilots create engineering capability. They help Indian companies learn fuel cell integration, hydrogen storage, safety systems, and maintenance. Those capabilities could later benefit other industries. So even if hydrogen trains never become common, the knowledge gained might still be valuable. Hydrogen trains are neither a miracle nor a failure. They solve a very specific problem. Countries adopted them where electrification is difficult. For India, the equation is different. With one of the world's most electrified networks, hydrogen won't replace electric trains on a large scale, but as a demonstrator, it's worthwhile. The real lesson is this: don't ask whether hydrogen trains are good or bad. Ask for which routes, under which economic conditions, and for what national strategy do they actually make sense.
If you enjoyed this Decode, subscribe to First Principles Decode. Join us as we uncover the first principles behind business, technology, economics, history, and the future. Thank you for watching.